Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Welcome back to the Social Media Derby. We've got a very interesting episode, 4 matches to review, the prediction table to look at. I don't really want to look at that, but we have to. And then, we've obviously got 2 weeks of the international break to look forward to. So, this week we won't have the traditional previews as such because obviously we haven't got games for a couple of weeks. We'll do that on next week's episode, so it will be a relatively short one this week. But before we get into it, for those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share if you can. Drop your comments down below as well. All the engagement we do interact with, so really appreciate the engagement as much as possible. Helps with the algorithms. And for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, any of the other audio podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review or any review if you can. All of that also helps getting the podcast out there as well. But before we get into the games, John, how you doing, mate? You all good? I've seen some pictures of you out on the tennis court. Rafa Nadal in it. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. I've been trying to keep myself active in that. So, doing pretty well. Good week for Arsenal, so I can't complain. But I've got to say before we get started, how is there another international break this quickly? I'm sick of this. If it's bloody Nations League again, I'm going to lose my mind. I feel like it was the last international break was literally like 2 weeks ago, and we've already got another one, and now the Lee Carsley bollocks starts again. Bloody hell. How have they done this?
They kind of front load and back load all of the international breaks through the season. Well, the new calendar looks like that anyway. So they do one in like September, one in October. I think we then don't get another one again until like February or something like that, or March, and then we obviously get some. So it's more like front and middle it. But it's irritating. I'm absolutely ecstatic to be in the international break after our results. So I don't share the same frustration as you. I'm really happy to be in this international break. But for very different reasons, I can understand how we feel about it. But let's quickly get into. For both teams, we'll quickly wrap up and do some very brief analysis of obviously the European games that we had during last week. United went away to Porto. Arsenal welcomed PSG at the carpet. We'll start with the United game first. 3-3. Wow, I mean that was a throwback to last season. United in the Champions League type game. And to be honest, if you look at the teams. Don't get me wrong, we're absolute right now, and Porto are definitely not as good as last season. But if you looked at the names, you'd say it was probably a Champions League caliber game. So I guess we shouldn't have been shocked from that perspective to see the crazy match that we did see. But finished 3-3. United were 2-0 up in I think 25 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. Rashford and Højlund scoring. Both goals were blunders by Diogo Costa, who, interestingly, I'd started a United game on FM recently, and I'd iced out Onana, and went and bought Diogo Costa, and then literally that same day he dropped 2 massive clangers against United, and funnily enough, on the British commentary as well, I can't remember who it was completely singing Diogo Costa's praises, saying he's one of the best goalies in the world, etc. And then he dropped 2 clangers. So we were 2-0 up after 25 minutes. Porto pull one back. I think like in the latter part of the first half, it was coming, to be honest. They were chucking balls into the box. De Ligt and Martinez looked shaky from the first minute against that Omarodion Don, who's come out of nowhere and looks like a bloody Drogba regen. But he was bossing both of them. And they get a goal. I think it's from Mazraoui. He tries to head it clear, but heads it to Onana. Onana saves it. And then I think it's Pepe jumps in, not the old defending Pepe, but their attacking midfielder Pepe jumps in. Right wing Pepe comes in and scores. Then they equalise. Omorodion's stoops over De Ligt, again beaten in the air, poor. It's pretty central though, so I don't know. Maybe it's De Gea's 2 penalty saves fresh in my mind, but I'm still looking. I'm always looking at Onana with like shots that are relatively close to his body, as to why he didn't save it. But maybe it was too hard and it went in 2-2 at half time. You'd hope Ten Hag's going to give him a bit of the hairdryer at half time already, considering all the rumours around Porto and Villa being his make or break matches. We literally come out second half. Omorodyon scores like literally within 5 or 10 minutes of the restart. 3-2 down. It's not looking good, bruv. And then Bruno decides to go and get sent off again, 2 matches in a row, and this one definitely won't get rescinded because 2 high boots. It's ridiculous to do it once in a game, but is stupid enough because I feel like there's a bit of a zero tolerance policy for that kind of stuff in it. So even if you don't make contact, pretty much refs are on your ass, but he did it twice.
Yeah.
The second one was a bit harsher because I think he was really like, I think it's Garnacho puts in quite an inviting ball into the area between the defence and goalie, and I feel like it's understandable why he goes for it, but it's just going with a high boot is stupid. So he's off. We're struggling with 10 men. Bring on Slabhead. Bit of a Route 1 football out the Arsenal, Bolton, Stoke playbook, and Ericsson swings in a corner. Maguire, what a header, to be honest. It was a great header. He completely dominates their defender who's trying to block him, and it ends 3-3. So yeah, man. Oh, what? I mean, it's the worst result really for Ten Hag inners and Ten Hag outers. Both results really for United this week have been poor in terms of it feels like we're in a bit of limbo. But with this one first, Jonts, I don't know what my opinion on this question is, but I want to ask you: do you think it's quite concerning that we've carried over this habit of losing 2-0 or 2-goal leads? And in this game, somehow we managed to salvage it. But, in other games, I'm thinking Chelsea, for example, I'm thinking all of our European games, basically last season, we managed to bottle most of those games. Do you think it's concerning we're still doing that now, even though Ten Hag got all of his guys in?
I definitely think it has to be concerning for everyone. But I think you have to kind of take it back to maybe the beginning of the season, right? It would be concerning based off of how you're starting with new players and kind of a fresh slate or a clean slate essentially for Ten Hag. But I think it's not as concerning based off of what's been happening to you recently, and the way that you've been getting pumped relatively frequently, like the Tottenham loss, etc. But I just think I almost feel like the 2-0 lead, as you said, you didn't really deserve it necessarily. I feel like it was kind of not handed to you, but it was definitely like they gave you a good chance to go 2-0 up. And I think a smarter team, a team that's a bit, got a bit wilier, got something about them with maybe a better manager. I think a better team just sees that out. Maybe they concede 1 goal, maybe they go and get another, but they don't go and bloody let in essentially 3 goals unanswered to go 3-2 down. So that has to be concerning just as a football club in general. Like even taking out the fact that you're Man United, it has to be concerning that you can't hold on to a lead. But at the same time, it's kind of like a match of two halves, like because you've also got to be somewhat proud that you went and got a last minute winner essentially, from big old Slabhead. So it's a really weird. It's just Man United is like a reality show, isn't it? It's like it's almost as if they're writing the script to be as dramatic as physically possible. Because that game, you could probably take positives and negatives out of it, right? Like 2 quick goals. You've not really been able to score too much in general. To go and do that to Porto, like we struggled to do that last year against them, right? They were really difficult to break down. You managed to get 2 goals immediately in somewhat of a drought. That's great. Then your falls out and you let 3 goals in. Bruno gets sent off. That's horrible. But then you go and get a last minute winner. It's like a game of, honestly, it's like a Hollywood movie being written in front of our eyes. Like there could be, Bruce Willis's bloody Ten Hag, in the future, because this is mental how this is going down.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird Like, we got such a weird juxtaposition between Man United in Europe and Man United in the league. Like, we can't seem to score a goal to save our lives in the league, and we're relatively miserly when it comes to the defense. We haven't conceded loads of goals. I mean, most of the goals we conceded come in 2 games, right? Liverpool and Spurs. But we've actually got the most clean sheets, weirdly enough, in the league. So it's not like the defense is a huge issue, but it's like flips on its head in Europe. Suddenly we can score. Although I do agree with you, like, obviously Porto kind of played a big role in 2 of our 3 goals, but still we showed some sort of cutthroat, cutting edge when it came to our attacking in Europe, and but we just struggled defensively, and it's just like, I don't know, man. It's such a roller coaster ride to be a United fan at the moment, because yeah, it's just, you're constantly flipping between shocking defeats, um, bottle job draws or defeats, like kind of unexpected victories, ball draws. Like, we've got pretty much the full, apart from comfortable win. It's probably the only one that we don't have in our wheel book at the moment. Yeah, it's just a nightmare. So yeah, personally speaking, as a United fan, I do think it's concerning to lose these 2-0 leads, because it was something that was so uncharacteristic for United, right? Like, we've obviously lost games. We've been pumped a bunch of times under Fergie, under other managers, and I think that's, most managers and teams can probably say that's happened to them. But the one thing that I can't remember in my lifetime as a United fan is us throwing away leads regularly, bottling games.
Yeah.
Like, that's never been something I've kind of attached to us until this. It's not even the whole of Ten Hag's reign, but really until the last, like, 12 months. It's just literally just all collapsed. And there's been a couple of interesting incidents. Obviously, we'll touch on them more. More of them happen in the Villa game. I'm thinking, the Ten Hag and Van Nistelrooy little spat. There's a clip of Rashford saying he's gone mad when he comes off the pitch. There's a couple of things brewing. Obviously, it makes sense. We're such a shambles on the pitch. There's obviously got to be something going on. But yeah, the bottling leads and almost losing games and all this kind of stuff. It's probably the thing that hurts me the most, because it's just such a yellow belly type sign of behaviour that I can't recognise from the team. But
And
it's
I,
obviously
I agree with you. It's something that Man United have never really been known for, particularly under Fergie. Obviously, right? You've always been known for being the one that does it to somebody else, maybe, right? Like, if anything, you were mentality monsters. And even when you weren't playing well, and maybe you go down a lead, you find a way to get yourself back into it. And it was never the opposite way around. You were almost never letting leads go, right? Like, there were tight games where you might be winning and then you end up losing, but you never were like coasting 2 goals up and then lose or draw 3-3. Like, Fergie would have been throwing bloody boots, hair dryers, whatever at every single one of the players on that pitch if they had done that. And I could see him bloody getting rid of all of them at the exact same time if that were to
yeah,
happen. So the fact that, like, Ten Hag, I don't want to go too much like onto him, but I do think that one of the keys of a manager is to set the tone and to set the expectations and essentially to follow through on them, right? Like, to punish or praise when the team does what you want them to do or doesn't do what you want them to do. And it just feels like it happens too frequently, right? Once is enough, right? And we're not even talking about Spurs, right? They've done it bloody 10 times or whatever. But once is enough for a manager, in my opinion, to say, okay, if that ever happens again, not a single one of you will ever touch the pitch for Man United again under my reign, right? And that kind of character, that like testicular fortitude, I think is required to really get a team to buck up. And the fact that it just keeps on happening to you just makes me think that Ten Hag really just doesn't have that man management or leadership style to be able to get this team to really like pull their heads out there.
yeah, I agree, man. And I think it's not on the agenda today, but obviously maybe we can talk about it next week, or we could just discuss it now if you want. But obviously, I think Benny McCarthy, Safa legend, by the way, love a bit of Benny McCarthy. What a G. very underrated as well. Actually, just a quick diversion. I was looking at stats the other day, and at Blackburn, he banged, man. He was like one season, he was like almost top scorer in the league. So, you know, he did it for Porto, he did it for Blackburn, but yeah, really good player. Obviously, he was on our coaching staff in the first 2 seasons of Ten Hag's reign. He's been speaking to some South African podcast, I think, or some sports show, and he's been kind of spilling the beans on a bunch of stuff. And he kind of mentioned the fact that tactically Ten Hag is top.
Yeah.
He knows his stuff, but when it comes to the passion and like the human element of being a manager, and this ties into the thing you just talked about, man management, he doesn't have it. Which obviously his NDA is obviously run out now, so he's able to chat this much, right? But I mean, it doesn't take a genius or like someone who's like a doctor in or an expert in reading, body language to understand that he's not someone that inspires. Like when you hear him talk, he's funny sometimes, and he's sometimes super candid and honest. But that passion, that belief that I think a lot of young players and just generally players, I think in the locker rooms in the change rooms need to be able to perform at the highest level, a la Jurgen Klopp, right? Like he doesn't have that. He may have all the tactics to out tactic everyone, but when it comes to the inspirational, the motivational stuff, I just don't think he's got it, man. And unfortunately, this generation of players needs that. And I would also argue that at some of the big clubs, especially the ones that have like this romantic history, right? And have gone through so much. I think Liverpool and United are quite similar in that sense, I guess, because of some of the tragedies and stuff. Like, I feel like you almost can't take that role without having that. Like, and I've heard people talk about even Mourinho, even though, people talk rubbish on his name these days. It was quite obvious that he had that in abundance, even if he was a maniac. Like, one of the things he had was the fact that he could just get a lot of people on side. Like, I think he obviously got that wrong at a bunch of different times, and maybe he stepped out of line with certain players. But I was even hearing Phil Jones talk about him, and because I think he was on Rio's pod, and he was talking about how he wanted to run through brick walls for him, and that was even after he'd like hammered him in front of loads of other players and criticized them and stuff. So yeah, I think you've got to have that, and I think when we move on from Ten Hag, because I think it's definitely now a when, not an if, right? I think that next manager has to have that. He has to have that. I think that's even a prerequisite over being some sort of tactical pep, genius. I think that's something you've got to have. And so anyway, yeah, I think it's a big reflection on the manager when you have this kind of pattern happening constantly, right? I think you can't constantly only blame the players, because the manager has to instill something in them to help them avoid this, and he hasn't, obviously. The last thing quickly, these back-to-back draws because of this new format. Do you think we're in trouble for qualifying top 8? Because obviously,
if you sit 21st,
yeah, I mean that sounds horrible, but there's like 32 teams, right?
No, of course, yeah.
But like the problem I have is if we finish 9th to 20, whatever the number is, we've got an extra 2 games. So my thing is, I don't think we're in jeopardy yet, and I would say the Porto game was always one earmarked as being a tricky one, but it's more like the 20 draw at home has screwed us a bit, because if we were sitting on 4 points, I think that's probably where we should be, or where I would be comfortable with, because we've still got to go away to Fenerbahce, which is going to be hard. I think we've got a couple of other difficult games. So, but anyway, do you think? Surely you're not going to be shameless and say we're in trouble, but I think we've still got time to claw it back, right?
You've got time to claw it back, but the issue that you've got is that obviously at this point in time, with only 2 games played, people aren't too far away from each other. But if you continue this performance, I think if you don't get 2 wins out of the next 2, you're almost guaranteed not to be in the top 8. And I this is my worry, is that like well, not even my worry, but this would be my worry if I was a Man United fan. You kind of need to, like with this format, you really need to get off to a good start and try and get some separation between yourself and like kind of the mid-ish teams that are going to be fighting each other and going to have hard draws. And obviously you've got some difficult games to come. Like obviously Fenerbahce is not going to be an easy one, but I also think there are some pretty tough away days that you've got coming up as well. I'm just looking through some of them, and it's not. it doesn't, in my opinion, like I think you've got to play Thessaloniki, but that's at home. I think you need to get 3 points there. Honestly, I think you need to get 3 points from the Fenerbahce game. Even if you don't, you still have a chance, obviously, because you've got to play like Bodo Glimt at home, and then you've got like Victoria Plitzen, which is going to be away, which is not going to be an easy game. So I just think you need to do the next two games that you play need to be you need to win. Doing that puts you
Oh,
back in contention for top eight, and I think you'll if you get it in the next two, if you get 6 points out of 6 in the next two games, I think you will be kind of a shoe-in to get that. But if you
yeah.
draw, if you lose those games, you're going to be in trouble, man, and you may as well just get yourself ready for those two extra playoff games.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just cracking up because I get it. Fenerbahce is hard, Porto away is hard. Saying Victoria Pilsen or whatever is hard was tricky.
No. But they're crap. But away, that's not a fun
No,
match.
no, I know. I'm just saying it's a reflection on how far we've fallen. That would be seen as the banker in that old Champions League format away if we had them. But now, because we're so rubbish, but no, I agree with you. We've got to get those.
Yeah.
We've got to get basically with this new format. You've got to win all your home games, try and nick a couple of wins, and then get draws as much as possible away. And you're probably
Yeah.
going to get in the top eight. We've obviously dropped 2 points at home now, essentially to 20. But I would say 20, Fenerbahce, and Porto are probably the hardest ones out of that run.
Yeah.
So if we were to draw at Fenerbahce even and win the other 5, I think we'd get top 8. But we've put ourselves in a tricky spot for qualification at the moment. But it's a long road. Let's quickly divert actually and just wrap up the other European game before we get into the weekend stuff. Arsenal at home to PSG in the Champions League. I think we both predicted wins for Arsenal, so it's not a shock that ended up 2-0 to you guys. But yeah, it was kind of a game of two halves, wasn't it? Because I think the first half, you guys were all over them, and I think it was a really, really impressive display. Saka was playing well. Havertz scored a really nice goal. PSG, oh my god, they were also stinking it up in that first half.
Yeah.
Absolutely poor. Donnarumma stinks it up. He's such a rubbish goalie,
He's
honestly.
so bad.
He's like Lenny from Of Mice and Men. He's just big, but he doesn't know anything about what he needs to do at all. He's just like clueless. And yeah, you end up winning 2-0. But the second half was kind of a bit of a damp squib, to be honest. Like you had not many chances, to be honest. PSG had a bit more of the ball. You kind of sat back defensively and just
Shut down
play
shop,
the game.
mate.
Yeah, play the game out and just held on to your clean sheet. So, first of all, do you think 2-0 was fair, or do you think because there's some people out there that are saying PSG, with all that domination in the second half, or as much of the ball they had, they should have tried, to get back in the game and score a couple goals. But do you think 2-0 was a fair result generally?
I think that it was fair that we won, but I do think it probably could have been closer. They had quite a lot of good chances in that second half that they probably should have put away. But I think from my point of view, it's a really positive performance because it's, when someone else is not performing well, and it's a big team at that, we need to take advantage of that and make sure we get out of there with a win, right? Like you will come across teams sometimes where they're just going to play you off the park, right? That's going to happen. Unfortunately, with the Champions League, it's going to happen quite frequently because you're playing against really, really good teams. And with PSG, obviously, they're maybe a shadow of what they could have been before, and they don't obviously have Mbappe and a lot of their stars that they previously had, but they're still a really handy team with a lot of really, really good players. So from my point of view, that's exactly what I want to see. I want to see us be ruthless and put them away when they're not able to capitalize on their chances. And I think it was a fair win, but I'd probably argue they were good for a goal. But yeah, they were being very. They're quite Spursy. PSG as a team are just they're like a French Spurs while still being the best team in that league. But when it comes to Champions League, they're basically like how Spurs are in the Premier League. They're very, very bottly, and they never really perform as well as they should. They almost always underperform versus how you'd expect from them. So to see them lose 2-0 when they probably should have got a goal is just par for the course. And I don't know, maybe did you think it was a fair result? Did you feel like they deserved more than that?
No, to be honest, I didn't. I don't agree with the people that think that. To be honest, but I I know they had a lot of the ball, and they had a few little moments here and there where, if there was a little bit more cutting edge, maybe they could have scored. Or if, I guess, the idea of PSG was the reality, maybe they could have got back into the game if they did grab a consolation goal. But I thought you guys just you completely smothered them in the first half. They didn't know what was going on. I think a lot of their players are really young. I think we got to
Yeah,
remember that, like, as well. Like, they've rebuilt basically and decided they're not going to go for big stars anymore.
yeah,
Um, and they're 3 or 4 years behind you guys. To be honest, they're kind of copying your blueprint a bit now with all the young talent that they've got in. So I like a lot of the young players they got. Zaire Emery's really handy. Jao Neves also
Barcola.
was pretty decent. Barcola's one of those ones that frustrates because he's clearly got loads of talent, but he's not picking out the right final ball or the right decision at the end when he gets into a dangerous position. But they have good players, but they're young, they're inexperienced, and I feel like this is one they can chalk up as just coming up against a team that's just way ahead of them. And you are better than PSG, let's be honest. Defensively,
Mm.
I feel like it was a walk in the park, and then even attacking, I don't think you guys got out of second gear. Um, the Havertz goal was nice, but the Saka one was just a calamity from their side
Yeah.
defensively. And then you didn't have to do anything, and I just felt like it was just so comfortable. Um, and I don't think they deserved anything. And I think, yeah, PSG are quite Spursy. I feel like it's probably a bit harsh on this current crop of players because they're all
Yeah.
really young but they are taking on the history of
It's
the
the history
PSG
of the
right now.
Tottenham. Yeah, it's the
Yeah, it's the
history
history
of
of the
the Paris
PSG.
Saint-Germain. Yeah.
So maybe they'll get infected by it because they are big bottle jobs, especially in the Champions League. But personally, I hope they don't because I quite like a lot of their players. But I don't particularly love that club in general, and they've
Mm.
taken quite a few snaky players from us. So yeah, I don't rate them too much. In terms of the second half display, though, quick, this should be an easy one because I don't think it's got too much holds
Yeah.
too much weight. But there's some people that obviously think Arsenal are an ultra defensive team at the moment. So the second half, you guys sitting back and just kind of just holding out for the 2-0 win. Do you understand why some people were maybe kind of a bit disappointed that you guys didn't go out and put them to the sword, or are you happy that you're able to just? It's like, is it a sign of your development that you can just hold tight after a 2-0, first half and feel comfortable beating a team of the caliber of PSG?
I mean, I understand why people might be frustrated because I don't think they're necessarily saying that we're ultra defensive. I think what they're saying is that our attack is poor, right? Or we're not able to capitalize as much as we were previously. Because one of the biggest things about us was that like we were pretty balanced, right? Like we were good defensively, but we were also good attacking. And obviously, with some of the issues that we've had, Martin Odegaard being out, some of the changes that he's made to the team have made us kind of maybe not as fluid going forward. And as a result, we probably sit on the ball a bit less. We let them sit on the ball a bit more, but we are defensively so solid that we're able to kind of just soak up pressure and deal with it. And so it feels like I'm sure to a lot of people that we are ultra defensive now, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I just think that our attack is making our defense look so much better because sometimes our attack is a bit one dimensional, and particularly without Odegaard and without some of our players really like firing. If you think of like Martinelli's hasn't been up until recently firing. Saka has had maybe not a down period, but kind of a quiet period of just like putting in work, but nothing like flashy happening. Obviously, Havertz he's a steady 7 every game, but he's not going to give you like a 10 out of 10, like a Cole Palmer-esque type of performance where he's going to slap in 4 goals. So from that point of view, our attack doesn't look as impressive, I think, as maybe as it looked when Saka and Martinelli and Odegaard were banging goals in for us. So people mistake that to mean that we're being ultra defensive. But I think they should be proud of it. Because imagine if we weren't good defensively right now, we'd be getting into shootouts with teams with an attack that is questionable against good defenses. So from my point of view, like I'm thanking my lucky stars that we've got such a good defense right now. And I think that is going to be a difference maker to us because in previous seasons gone by when we had bloody Rob Holding to come in or whoever else coming in, Zinchenko on the left hand side, you would be worried. Like if we weren't firing on the attack, our defense was not going to keep us in games necessarily, and was going to actively, in the case of the Liverpool game last season, or sorry, the season before last, will actively work against you. And so, from my point of view, I'm very happy with it. I think it shows a sign of development as a club. It also shows, from my point of view, that Arteta is a very pragmatic manager. I think defense is not sexy, but it wins you. Like many people have said, it wins you leagues. And I think, from our point of view, it's not. I'm not even gonna. I don't mean this as a shot, but if you look at like the Liverpool team that under Jurgen Klopp, they relied very heavily, in my opinion, on star performances across that defense. Right, they had the likes of Virgil van Dijk who'd get them out of trouble. Obviously, Matip was good, but he wasn't like, in my opinion, he wasn't a world beater. They had, attacking wing backs essentially that were just banging goals in and getting assists for fun. But I think it was more down to the individual players as to how well that defense worked, right? And like, think of Alisson saving their constantly. From my point of view, I think Arteta has done something different here, where I feel like our defense is more system based. I do think Saliba and Gabriel are very good, but I think you've seen with Gabriel at the very least, if the system ain't good, he has the potential to be a bozo and to do bozo-like things, right? And even Saliba, he can get rinsed every now and then as well. We've seen it happen a couple of seasons ago, last season even as well. So the fact that that is not happening, and the fact that, Ben White, Jurriën Timber, Calafiori, even though Calafiori is looking like he might get rinsed every now and then, the system is pulling them out of trouble. And so from my point of view, I've got so much respect for Arteta, for the fact that he's given so much credence to building a great defensive system. And he's so confident in it that he can literally say, hey, opposition, have the ball. Honestly, I don't even need it, and I will still beat you. And again, we're going to need that when it comes down to winning Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues, whatever we want to win in the future. We're going to need a really, really good defence. Because imagine if we get anywhere near the Champions League final, we've got to play bloody Real Madrid and they've got Mbappe, Vinny and Rodrigo running at us. Like, if we had some of the defenders that we had previously and some of the defensive system we had previously coming up against them, I'd literally not even want to watch the game before it's even started. At least with this team, I feel somewhat confident that we're not going to get absolutely rinsed. Again, clip me up if you have to, if that ever happens, if that ever comes true. But fingers crossed it doesn't. So, all in all, the people that are saying that we're ultra defensive, make up your mind, man. Like, when we were stinking it up and Rob Holding was getting rinsed by bloody Haaland, everyone was saying, what is this? We need better depth. We need a better defensive system. What's going on here? What's going on there? We do go and do that, make up for a faltering attack. And now everyone's saying that we're ultra defensive. Like, it just shows that football fans can't be pleased, right? Like, you can't please everyone. And at the end of the day, all that matters is the result.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I do agree with you, generally speaking. I think everyone's aiming for a balanced attack and defense. That's like nirvana, right? And I don't think many teams can achieve it. I think the thing that makes you look, or people focus so much on the defense, I guess, is just because your attack hasn't been quite as fluid and as effective as you'd hope, especially compared to last season. But yeah, there are valid reasons why. Obviously, Odegaard being out being a big one. I think in the future, what this has taught you is that you might need to. You've either got to expedite and Waneri into the team and give him more chances, or you got to go and get someone who can deputise as effectively or as close as possible to Odegaard if he gets injured. Because injuries are going to happen. So you don't want your attack to just be like all on one player, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's just trying to find flaws and trying to pick holes at Arteta and the team, because you're doing well. And that's what comes with it. And I think we've talked about agendas. There is a, I'm not going to go out here and do conspiracy theories, but, I don't think Arteta is a media darling. And so I think with that comes these kind of unfair, picking holes at things when there's nothing to really investigate. So I think it's impressive that you can just shut down, even if PSG are in transition as a club, it's still impressive to be able to shut them down and not give them too many chances and get the clean sheet. So yeah, I think it's all a lot about nothing, really. Let's get on to your game then, because we'll do it in chronological order then, because you guys played at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Home again after the Leicester game, back-to-back home games in the Premier League. Game week 7. Arsenal win 3-1 against Southampton. The first half was pretty boring. I'm going to be honest. Not too much happened.
Yeah.
You had a few chances here and there, but nothing major to write home about. The second half kind of just exploded though. Like after everyone came back from half time, Southampton clearly went for it a lot more. They were starting to create stuff. That Dibbling, I tell you what, where's the hell has he come from? Because he rinsed Dallo a couple of weeks back, and everyone was like, "Who the hell is this kid?" And to be honest, he did give Calafiori quite a difficult game. I don't think he rinsed him as badly, maybe as Dallo, but he definitely twisted him up a couple of times, and he was causing him issues. And then he obviously is involved in Archer's opening goal, where he kind of shimmies, and it was a bit weird from Saliba because normally Saliba's like he's exemplary when it comes to like jockeying. It's one of his like kind of his attributes, which I think is quite VVD like, and I think it's something that's a big part of defensive play in this modern age, and he's normally amazing at it, and no one kind of gets the better of him. But Archer manages to shimmy and get a bit of space, fires a great shot down low. I think Saliba does get a little nick on it, and it beats Raya into the bottom corner. Nothing I think you can really do about that from Raya's perspective. Although he didn't have the greatest game, he was back to kind of Flappy Bird's Raya a bit in that second half when things got a bit difficult. And there were a couple of little shaky moments from corners and stuff where I was like, this is a bit sad to see, because Raya, I thought Raya was on that trajectory where he's been unbelievable this season, so he should be allowed a bit of a shaky one, but it definitely was one of his less confident games. But you guys strike back immediately, almost immediately anyway. Havertz, great finish. Probably one of his better and more striker-like finishes that I've seen from Havertz in an Arsenal shirt. It was pure striker vibes. He's a little shimmy away from the defender after Saka releases him, bangs it in off the right-hand post. Ramsdale's got no chance. And then, you guys are back in the game. Martinelli scores again from a great cross from Saka. And that was that's a really big bonus as well on Martinelli's part. He scored now in a couple of games in a row in the Premier League. He's looking a lot more lively from that attacking aspect. So that's really positive. And for all the Martinelli defenders, I think you can, get your chests out now, because he's definitely vindicating a lot of your support. But then for some reason, I don't know why, you guys slowed everything down a lot and Southampton, and kind of allowed Southampton back into it. They hit the woodwork twice in literally, I think, the two successive attacking moves. And again, Raya's looking a bit all over the shop. And it was looking a bit shaky. It looked like maybe Leicester was going to happen again, where you throw a lead away. But thankfully, Saka nips in and scores after a Sugawara error to seal the win 3-1, and you come away with 3 points. But quickly, I think you'll probably agree. I don't know, but obviously this was Saka was involved in every goal. He was clearly the man of the match. Big performance from him. Havertz was pretty good as well. Obviously the finish was good. Your defence was probably less assured as usual, but still Gabriel was out here dominating. He was still playing really good. Is there anyone else you want to shout out for good performances? I don't know if there's too many more above that, but those are the three I saw when I watched the game.
No, really, yeah. I mean, Saka was obviously, he was class, man, and it just goes under the radar because obviously with what's been happening recently with Palmer, the whole conversation around Palmer versus Saka versus Foden's come back up again, and everyone's talking out the sides of their mouth saying that bloody Cole Palmer's the best player to ever play in the Premier League. And as a result, Saka's getting shots off of people, and I'm just like, my man's not been involved in any of this. Just let him do his thing. He's been, in my opinion, quietly our best player of the season so far. And I think it's because of the work that he's been doing both off the ball and kind of to the disciplined work that he's been doing as part of our attack. That doesn't always look super sexy and doesn't always get all of the plaudits, but really contributes to us actually functioning as an attack, even now in our down period. And I think he hasn't really obviously got credit for it because it's not, easy to see. It's not him banging in 4 goals or whatever else. But in this game, I think it just goes to show that if he continues to do that, if he continues to play in such a disciplined way, he continues to do the job that he needs to do combined with the talent that he has and the consistency that he has, I think it just goes to show that he is one of the best players in the Premier League. And he impact-wise, if you think about like any attack in the league, I think he has one of the biggest impacts on our team. You know, I don't even know. I can't even really say what our team would look like without him, because he plays literally every bloody game, right? Like I can't even imagine what does our team look like without Saka. Even in the games where we're putting out all the kids, he's bloody with the kids because he's technically still maybe close to that kid category. So honestly, I can't sing his praises enough. I mean, on the other players, I think Havertz, I don't know what got into him. That is the most clinical I've ever seen Havertz be. And I almost felt like I was watching somebody else. And I feel like he just continues to make steps in the right direction for us as a club. I think he's continuing to build up his confidence. I've seen a lot of stuff come out from Arteta, and just from players that know him and people that know him, that he's quite a sensitive guy, and that he does require quite a lot of love to really feel like he's part of the team. But once he is feeling like he's loved, he becomes like a warrior for that team. And that's something that I'm starting to see from him, is that like he, in many ways, was not a strong mentality player. But when he's got this kind of love around him, when he's got the strength of Arteta and the strength of the players around him, I just feel like he's becoming like one of the stalwarts in our team. And he offers such a unique benefit to us that, like, if he can add clinical finishing to it, like, the sky is the limit. Like, I honestly think that he could be up there with Saka and Odegaard as our most impactful attackers if he can start to finish. Because really, that's always been the biggest criticism of him. Like, he can't hit a barnyard with a banjo, and he misses quite a lot of open chances. So if he can add that into his game, I'll stop asking for a striker. You know, give me a young backup and let my man do his thing, because he's, combine that with what Trossard offers off the bench, and I think we will be back in a position of having a relatively balanced team. But he does have to do it more frequently. I'm sorry to say, right? Like, the headers and all of that stuff is great. Those are real, like, salt of the earth type of goals for a striker. But I do need to see a little bit more of this, slapping goals in, really, really good one-touch finishes, or two-touch finishes. So, yeah, big from him, but I need to see it keep continuing. I need to see him do that more frequently so that people put some respect on his name. And then obviously I want to give a shout out to Martinelli. I've been a big supporter of him. And really not against other fans. It's just against our fans, like getting on his back and even getting to the point where they're celebrating getting bloody Raheem Sterling and saying that he should start over Martinelli. Like, that's absolutely mental to me that we can twist and turn so quickly. So I've always been a big supporter of him. I know that he's had somewhat of a down period, but it's just nice to see him get back on the score sheet. And it's nice to see. I was actually watching funnily enough, it was a tweet or a video in a tweet that was making fun of our team from like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was absolutely stinky. And it was basically comparing our team man for man versus today. And he was in it. Like, he was literally in that team with all the stinky dons having to, like, pull us out the mud alongside a Saka. And I think people kind of forget how important he was to the team. And we give so much love to Emile Smith-Rowe. We give so much love. Like, when he left, everyone was like, it's the most respectful I've seen a team be about a player that didn't really, like, fully achieve, like, massive things at the club, right? He had a good season or two, sure, but he never really went on and did anything crazy, right? And we end up having to get rid of him. But there was such an outpouring of love towards him. But when Martinelli's having a down period, yet has contributed so much to the team so far at such a young age, everyone jumps on his back. And it almost feels like it's not the anti-English thing, but it's just like, the English bias. Like, Emile Smith-Rowe, we're happy because, we can relate to him. He's a bit of a lad, whatever else. But with Martinelli, he's quite quiet. He's not coming out into interviews. I've almost never seen him actually come out in an interview or speak at all. And as a result, we kind of treat him as if he's almost not human, and we start talking crap about him when he has a bit of a down period. I think it's not on, and I'm hoping that people will start eating their words and give him a bit more respect, and also give him a bit more love, because he's a young player, man. He needs it too. And I think Arteta has shown us that the morale of the team and the mentality of the team and the togetherness of the team is critically important for us to be successful, right? I'm not saying that we need to have, like, bloody huddles on the pitch with a crying Zinchenko over 5 minutes, but we need to be, as a fan base, together to pull for our players, right? Like, fair enough, rightfully criticize them when they need to be criticized and say that they need to do better in a constructive manner. But at the same time, let's not just write players off, especially young players that have been so exciting for us previously. Especially when the alternative we've got is bloody Raheem Sterling, who had an absolute stinker of a game alongside of, I think Jorginho wasn't very good either, but like they all got bloody hooked at 60 minutes or whatever it was. I think it was Sterling, Jesus, and Jorginho all got taken off at 60. So I don't want to hear anyone saying that Sterling should start or whatever else. Give Martinelli's his credit. Maybe let him learn something from Sterling. There's probably a lot to learn from Sterling. I'm not saying that Sterling's crap or anything. He's an experienced player, but I want that excitement that comes with a Martinelli. So, yeah, long-winded answer, but very happy with Saka, Havertz, and Martinelli. I'm not going to call out anyone from the defence. I don't think they really, they put in so many good performances. I don't want to overdo it and give them credit for what I don't think was a great performance. I think it was decent, but there was a lot to be desired, let's say.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. And yeah, I think Martinelli's on the comeback trail. I agree with you. I've always rated him. I thought he's a really good player. He is a young player, and I think it's also part of the style thing, which I think people always kind of wrangle with, because he's got one of those styles where he is often kind of like head down, running into difficult situations, trying to dribble through them and stuff. Which when it works looks amazing. When it doesn't work, looks a bit boneheaded. And I think people hold on to that too much, because there's a lot of wingers that start out that way, because that's kind of street football. That's kind of like how you play when you're playing with your mates. But they forget that he's a young player. He's not a Rashford, for example, who's 27, still trying to do that every now and again. He's a lot younger than that, right? And that's not shots at Rashford, because I actually think he's been playing better recently. I'm just saying, like, that kind of player is divisive, and I think that's the reason why your fan base kind of sits on opposite ends with him at times. But yeah, he had a decent game when he came on. So let's ask a question then. Second half, there were shaky moments, right? And I'll be honest, Southampton are pretty crap overall, right? I know they've got a couple of handy players, but generally they're pretty rubbish. So were you worried a little bit in that second half, especially when you're go the goal down, or even when you were 2-1 up, and like I said, you guys slowed down the tempo and Southampton suddenly got back into it, started creating chances, hitting the woodwork? Were you a bit worried you're seeing Leicester 2.0, or did you still feel confident that you get the win?
I was more worried seeing us go 1-0 down, because I'm less confident in our attack right now to get a goal back, if that makes sense. When we're 2-1 up and things slow down a little bit and they maybe get a chance here and there, I don't know what it is, but maybe I've kind of come to be a bit more confident. Like the Arsenal from 4 years ago, I would have literally been shitting myself. I would have been thinking, we're going to lose this. It's written in the stars. We're going to pull a Spurs, basically, and this is going to go badly. But just over the last couple of years, I think they've done a good job of kind of instilling some form of belief in me, particularly against an opponent like Southampton, where we almost rightfully feel like we should win this. We should be winning this game, even if it's 2-1 and they have a couple of chances here and there. So I was more worried with the 1-0. And it is somewhat of a worrying sign. I think it shows that we are not firing on all cylinders and we're still winning. And I know what everyone's going to say. Everyone's going to say, Southampton and Leicester, they're the two promoted teams. They're both crap. Don't get too excited about, being able to get last minute winners or, come from a goal down and beat them. Fair, fine. That's completely true. At the same time, I can only really play what's in front of me. And so far in the seasons that I've seen, we have played well or got good results even when we have not played well. Right, the Aston Villa game, they could very easily have won that, and we came out with a win. Right, the Leicester game, they could easily have rode that momentum and either got a point from us or won that game, and we ended up doing something about it. Right, we ended up getting those 2 late goals in stoppage time and getting the victory. In this one, it was even better because we went a goal down, but we almost struck back immediately. And that's what I need to see. I need to see us really, if we're not starting well, if we're not firing on all cylinders, once we get the wake up jolt, we need to wake up and do something about it. And that was the best thing I saw from that game. So it's worrying, but at the same time, it does give me belief that when we do start firing on all cylinders, hopefully soon, that we are going to slap teams off the park. But at the same time, if we don't start firing soon and we come up against a better team, we may not get so lucky and we may end up dropping points. Like you saw Fulham against City, right? Like some of these mid-table teams are real bloody handy, man, and they will shock you. And if you're not performing well, they can come and get something from you, right? Nottingham Forest against Liverpool is another great example. So it's even more. It's kind of, I like that we've gone back to almost, the Premier League of before, where it was a lot more even, and anyone, even if you were Man United or Arsenal or the Mourinho Chelsea or whoever, there was a chance that someone could nick something off you, right? There were some good teams in there. And I feel like we've almost kind of got back to that this season with a couple of these teams like Fulham and Nottingham Forest and Brighton and whoever else that are really, they will come and nick points from you, man. They're like, even if you're the best team and you've won, buddy, 4 Premier Leagues in a row and whatever else, they will come and nick some points from you here and there. So, yeah, that worries me. If we come up against someone slightly better, that's not a bloody promoted team that's almost certainly going back down, we might have a bit more trouble. But, you live to survive another day, or you survive to live another day, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I think it was shaky at times, but I feel like you guys have a reverse Ten Hag syndrome. So you've proven recently, anyway, in recent years, that you've got the knack of scoring late goals when you're in a bit of a tricky situation. I mean, you've done it a couple of times against us, but that's not saying anything. But you've done it against a lot of teams to rescue draws and rescue wins. So yeah, I mean, it's worrying from like a big picture perspective. I guess you want to be slapping all these guys, but from the immediate situation, you're still winning, and winning is the most important thing, and you're finding the way to get there. So yeah, it helps when Saka has a goal and 2 assists, and I know it's not the most glamorous performance, but it's just so efficient, man. And they all count the same. So yeah, when you have a performance like that from one of your big players, I think it puts you in a good position to win a game. I think that's generally how football works. Let's get into that Saka question then, because you mentioned it a bit earlier. It's all over, social media. All the content creators are talking about it. The big broadcasters are talking about it. All the pundits are talking about it. Saka versus Palmer versus Foden has come up again, and the whole is Saka, Palmer, Foden world class, or are they world class? Sorry. What's your take on it now with new evidence? With Saka comes off the back of a goal and 2 assists. Palmer obviously got 4 goals in 1 half the other day. I think Foden's kind of put himself in the back seat for this one because he's been out with illness and obviously didn't have the best Euros. Has all of this new evidence changed your opinion on things, or are you still kind of where you were before when we've discussed this previously?
I think I'm relatively similar to where we were before. I think with Saka, the question was never like, can he raise his level to being world class? I think he has shown that he can. The point will always be, can you do it for long enough, and will it result in your team winning things? I think number one, can it result? Can you do it long enough? I think he is proving, like, game in, game out, he can. But obviously the jury's still out, right? He's got to give it probably a couple more seasons of being at this level and above to really get everyone on side. But the second question of will we win something, I think that is always a harsher question on judging individual performances. But if we do win something this season and Saka continues to perform in the way that he's performing, I don't think people can argue with me that he's a world-class winger, right? Like, has he had a world-class career fully yet? No, obviously not. But he's still young. He's got plenty of years left. And if he goes at this rate, I think he will end up with a world-class career. But right now, if you're telling me choose a right winger from the world outside of Salah, obviously, Saka's got to be in the conversation for either the first or the second pick. So I don't think there can be really any argument, right? Like, he's got to keep on doing it. It's a big if. He's got to keep on doing it, and we've got to win something. And if we can do those things, then I'm sorry, then the nail's in the coffin, and all of the Saka haters can jog on, basically, right? Like, that, in my opinion, will cement him as being a world-class winger. Again, not a world-class career yet, but he is in that category of, I am a world-class winger, and if somebody has 150 million to spend on a right winger and they need someone, if it's a Real Madrid or whoever else, I'm probably number one on that list or number two on that list. And to me, that's what a world class winger means. From the whole Palmer part of the conversation, again, he's a really exciting player. He's quite clearly Chelsea's best player. Chelsea are an absolute nut house of a team, as much as everybody wants to say, oh, all the chaos has resulted in this. Look at us now. Give it a fucking minute. All right. It's been 7 weeks. Let's see what you do next week. Let's see what you do the week after that. Let's see if Enzo can keep it off his back when things aren't doing so well. Because he seems like he's a bit of an, let's be perfectly honest, right? Like he's a bit, he's a bit short with his responses, and the English media don't like that, right? So I've got to believe that when he gets in tough times, which I believe he will, because Chelsea can't keep this up forever, he is going to have some issues as well. And when that happens, then you can come and chat to me, right? But right now, I don't think anyone can say like Palmer is not like on form one of the best players in the Premier League right now. I don't disagree with that. Like on form, he definitely is one of the most impactful and almost throwback kind of street ball type players that a lot of the game is gone type of dons talk about. This today's game not having enough of. So he's definitely in a conversation to be, really, really good. But I think you've just got to say his team is a shambles. He is essentially the number one option in that team. I know they've got all these other stars. I know that, right? I know that. But I'm sorry, Cole Palmer runs that team, right? He is the only one, in my opinion, in that team that has enough like credit to say like, I'm taking that penalty, I'm taking that free kick, get away from that, that's mine now. Especially with like the Raheem Sterlings and all them not gone. He's the only one that really has that credit in the bank, right? Maybe a couple of them can build that credit, but I'm sorry, João Felix and Kunku, they're great players, but they haven't got the credit in the bank at Chelsea to do that. So he really is the running that show. And as a result, obviously, he's going to be doing crazy things that he does. And I think that it's a good conversation to have, but I don't think you can say he is better than Saka because he hasn't done it for long enough. He's doing it in a team that, in my opinion, is performing worse in general. And if they can go and get top four this season, or if they can go and do something like actually of note, and he continues to be the absolute star when the rest of all the players around him are crap, then we can revisit the conversation. But when Chelsea are getting better, but still not in the conversation for winning the league, and he's really getting the run of the show, and he's done it for what, a season and 7 games. I think it's a bit too early to put that pressure on him, and a bit too early to have the conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. It's a hard one. I get it. It's the easy conversation to have because Palmer's like the flavor of the month, and not the month, but season and a month or two or whatever. And the level of the performances has been so high. Like he's literally, like you said, have put Chelsea on his back in multiple games across now a season and a bit. And there is that street baller, old school throwback like element to his style of play, which I think elevates him even higher, and people start putting him in conversations like world class and comparing with other players who have been doing it for longer or put up similar numbers. And I think that's the reason why he's in the conversations. Don't get me wrong, he's a very, very good player. I'd love him to, I'd love to have him at my club. He's the type of player that I think most fans would say that about, right?
Pretty much.
And they kind of he unlocks like this memory, I think, of fans of my generation and maybe even your generation, and definitely probably slightly older generations of kind of how football used to be. But I'm sorry, that's still not enough to put someone in a world class conversation. I think the things that you've talked about are more critical to really discussing that point. How long they've done it, someone's longevity, the team and personal accolades that a player has won. If you want to throw the numbers in, obviously I think that is a big thing. I think style of play does play a role, but I'm sorry, we've talked about Mo Salah, we talk about even Heung-min Son and players like that who have been at some point world class, so you could say maybe they've had a world class career, and they have to tick the majority of those boxes. For Mo Salah, in my opinion, he ticks nearly all of them except the style thing, because I do think Salah's style is not. He is like a modern player. It's efficiency. It's everything about it is about like trying to achieve the goal of scoring and winning something, and not necessarily about flair and the kind of Jogo Bonito type football that I think a lot of us when we're growing up were attracted by. But he ticks all the other boxes. With Son, he ticks nearly all the boxes except the trophies one, because he's at Spurs. It's not been their priority for the majority of the time that he's been there. And he's got close a couple of times, but he hasn't quite got over the line. But he ticks the majority of all the other boxes, so you put him in there. With Saka, he's at that stage where I feel like he's ticking nearly all the boxes apart from the club accolade and personal accolade situation. So he's kind of following at the moment that Son trajectory, but I think Arsenal probably are at that stage now where they will win something in these next couple of years. I don't know what it will be, whether it will be Premier Leagues or Champions Leagues or whether it will be FA Cups and whatever else it is. But I think it's inevitable that you will win something. So I think he'll cross over into that Salah territory where I understand if you compare him with Palmer on the eye, Palmer is more of the throwback, silky, more technical, flair-like player. Sure, I don't think Saka's rubbish on that side, by the way, but I do think if you compare them, then I understand why people sway towards Palmer and Foden. But if you look at efficiency, if you look at how much he does for his team and the length of time, he blows those other guys out the water. And so it's an unfair conversation, I think, but I get it. It's because you're picking the star players from a couple of the big teams at the moment. They're all English, which also I think helps play a part in it. And so I think that's the reason why people have the conversation. But I think Saka is the closest out of the three to be in that conversation genuinely as being world class. But like I said, and like you said, we'll look back on his career afterwards and decide whether or not he's had a world class career, and I'm sure that'll be a valid convo. But all right, let's wrap up the Arsenal chat here. Then let's move on to United. This one will probably be a little bit quicker because it was just such a rubbish game. But game week 7 for Man U, we travel to Villa Park, take on Aston Villa, fresh off a big win in the Champions League. They beat Bayern Munich 1-0. That boy John Duran scoring a goal off the bench to win it. Great finish, by the way. And I watched that game. They were absolutely bouncing. Villa Park was absolutely it was lift off, mate. They were.
I love that they put the bloody Champions League trophy in the tunnel every single time, just to remind the Bayerns of the world, we've won it too, lads. And John Duran's goal. I know that this is not an Aston Villa podcast, but he made Neuer, who's obviously one of the best goalkeepers ever.
Tall,
he made him
Don,
look, but he made him look like he was bloody David De Gea or someone like that, in terms of his positioning. He made him look like he was in no man's land, right? And this is Manuel Neuer, who basically invented the whole sweeper keeper idea, or at least not invented or reinvented it, right? And he makes him just look so stupid. And John Duran is just that guy right now. And it's looking more and more like Chelsea had the right idea with all their strikers, and in my opinion, probably ended up with the worst of the three options they could have had. So it's just funny to me because he's banging goals in, Omorodian's banging goals in against you lot, and I know that they want to tell me that Jackson's really good, but he still can't hit a barn over the banjo. So
they might go in for Osman again, and they might end up with a good striker anyway. But the ones that they were linked with, both had a pretty good week in Europe. So I'm sure the Chelsea hierarchy, Agbali and Bowley and all Clearlake and all those guys were probably punching walls and tables and stuff, missing out on those guys. But that wasn't the same as this game. Let's put it that way. Villa certainly didn't play as well as they did in that Bayern game against us. I'm going to give a bit of credit to us, but also I'm going to also be realistic. It wasn't purely down to our defensive display. They did look wiped. I'll be real. That first half there was no point watching it. It was just an absolute bore fest. Not many chances whatsoever. I think the only couple of Rodgers puts one wide. early on, and we kind of just stifled them in the middle of the park, which I think actually worked really well because their midfield has been something that's really caused a lot of problems in a lot of the games this season, especially against the big teams. I think you guys really struggled against Rodgers, obviously in that game, even though you won, and their midfield overran you guys. So I think that idea and that tactic was a right one from Ten Hag, but it obviously stopped us from creating too much. Second half is slightly better. Rashford pulls a good save out of Martinez. He's quite lucky actually not to get a red card for a second yellow though, which I don't know what's going on with us disciplinary wise. We're like constantly towing that line of getting someone sent off. It's never a straight red either. It's always like well, I guess Bruno's was a straight red, but I think that was probably unfair. But the other incidents have all been like, you're on a yellow, why are you making that challenge type of situation? Which again, I think goes back to the players not using common sense and not really thinking straight on the pitch. But yeah, the rest of the half, there's not too much going on. Fernandes was very close to a beautiful free kick, by the way, hits the bar. It would have been very harsh on Villa if we did win it that way. And then Jaden Philogene almost wins it at the end, but Dalot makes a good block. Standout players, Evans was head and shoulder above everyone on the pitch. And I'm not saying he was like Van Dijk reincarnated, but he just did every little thing right. And he was calming. He was a total opposite of what we saw in Europe a few days earlier from Martinez and De Ligt. He just kind of settled everything in, even with the injuries, because Maguire comes off relatively early. I think it was after the first half. Lindelof comes on, so that was pretty telling, and De Ligt as well. And just Evans was kind of that calming factor that didn't cause too much trouble, and De Ligt looked much better for it. But yeah, ends 0-0. Dalot, I was happy with as well because he's been absolutely abysmal the last 2 or 3 weeks. He was poor in Porto. He's been poor for nearly every game that I've watched so far this season. So he finally had a decent game, both attacking and defensively. He was actually okay. And defensively in particular, he was much better than he has been recently. So I was encouraged by that. And on that note, Mainu as well. Something that people have criticised about him. I think Sourness has said it, and a bunch of other people have said, like, that he can't defend and he doesn't track back, and he's good on the ball, but he doesn't know the other side of the game, and blah, blah, blah. He was very good defensively in this game. He made loads of interceptions. He made loads of blocks. He was covering space relatively well, considering I think we all accept Mainu's he's not a P&P merchant. He's not an Amadou Onana. He's not, someone like that that's going to cover blades of grass and be everywhere. But he had a much better game from that perspective in this one, and he played massively. He played a massive role in us getting the draw in this game. And yeah, we come out of it 0-0. To be honest, man, I don't know how much time we even want to spend on this, but I guess the big talking point was our defence, centre-back pairing being dropped before the game. Martinez and De Ligt both riding bench. Were you shocked and surprised to see that, or do you think it's actually it was a good decision from Ten Hag to do that?
I think in the end it was a good decision. I don't think you can argue that if Johnny Evans ends up being man of the match and you come out of it with another clean sheet, I don't think you can say it was a bad decision. But it is a surprising decision somewhat, because I feel like Ten Hag, I'm not going to say he has his favourites, but I definitely feel like he has a preference for who he wants to be playing in that defence. And to drop them both and to bring in what I'm going to argue is two players that he doesn't really want to see touch the pitch too frequently is a bit surprising from Ten Hag, because I feel like Ten Hag he's typically not that ruthless. Or sometimes he is, maybe, but I just thought he would have a bit more confidence in those players, and especially a centre-back pairing. They do need time to bed in, and they won't always be perfect together. They're going to need time to get used to each other, and maybe he just didn't want to give them the time to do that in such a big game, particularly if he's got his job on the line, and he went for the experienced option. But it is a bit surprising to me. I mean, did you... Am I misremembering, or is he typically not this ruthless? Does he? I feel like he sticks with players that are crap for a lot longer than he should in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, you said you're not sure if he has favourites. He definitely's got favourites, mate. Like, bro, he's 100% got favourites. The fact that during his worst period, Rashford was still touching the pitch in any form, I think is proof of that. I think the whole Sancho saga is born out of the fact that Ten Hag had favourites, and that Antony was getting so much game time when he was playing just like some of the worst wing play you'll ever see. And don't get me wrong, I'm again not defending Sancho on this, but yeah, I think that whole scenario is born out of the fact that he's got favourites. So yeah, I was surprised from that perspective that they were dropped, but I think it was fair. Like, you can't play that poorly against Porto. I don't even think they were massively to blame against Spurs. I think the whole team as a unit was completely poor, to be honest, in that game, and they crumbled. But I don't think the defence, the centre-back pairing was massively to blame for that Spurs game. But in Porto, they definitely were. And I'm not going to lie, it was worrying to see how bad Martinez and De Ligt were. And it really didn't look like they had any relationship. So I get it. It's obviously a big win for the Ten Hag haters, though, because you're bringing back Maguire, who he kind of was trying to flog for the last couple of seasons. You bring back Evans, who was kind of like an emergency signing last season to kind of help out with the under-23s and has ended up playing so much for us in the first team. That all points towards Ten Hag not knowing what he's doing. If you take away those factors, though, like you said, it worked because Evans was the best player on the pitch and he helped us get this result. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have got this result. And I would argue that even though I rate Martinez and De Ligt higher than Evans in terms of their current footballing ability and athletic ability, I think it was proof in the pudding that they probably were not the right players to put in from the start if we wanted to go for a more tight, resolute defence. Because I do think there's elements even that Harry Maguire have when it comes to organisation that Martinez and De Ligt don't have at the moment. I think De Ligt's got the potential to get there. I think he probably is going to struggle in these few months where he's still acclimatising to the league and to the team and everything that's going on. But I do think he's got the personality to probably emulate some of that leadership quality that Evans and Maguire have. But I think at this particular moment, they're better choices from that perspective. So, yeah, man, I was surprised. At the same time, I was quite actually understanding of the decision because I think you can't play that poorly and not have any kind of, punishment for it. Like, literally all three goals were either De Ligt or Martinez's, not fault, but they allowed it to happen. And you would expect players that you're buying for 40, 50 million to not allow that to happen against Porto. Don't get me wrong, Samu looked good. Amorodian did look good. But I do think they played a role in allowing those goals to happen as well. So you've got to have consequence for bad games. I agree with that. It's just obviously a bit it's hilarious that it's Evans and Maguire who come in for them. You'd hope you've got the Euros and someone else, the Branthwaites or whoever they plan to get in their defensive unit to be able to come in for them instead. But yeah, in if you're looking at things clinically, it worked because Evans and Maguire were both good when they played, and even when De Ligt came on, he was much better for having Evans next to him. Now, the big question, I guess we can't avoid it, is again, like the Saka world class topic, is the Ten Hag will he survive topic. Where do you think these two draws against Porto and Aston Villa have left him? Do you think he will still have a job at the end of this transfer window, bloody hell, at the end of this international break? Or do you think there's obviously talk around Ineos having these summits and big 7-hour meetings? What do you think the end result of all these meetings will be? And do you think he will be at the helm at the end of this international break?
It's a good question. I don't think the results have either hurt or helped him. The Porto one, obviously, I think it's good that was the first game to get out of the way. And the fact that it went the way it went, and then it got kind of overshadowed by the Villa kind of sturdiness, or the fact that it was basically uneventful and nothing really happened, and you guys weren't in the news cycle, and instead Tottenham are taking them all the flack, right? So I don't think the results have hurt his case, but I don't think they've helped him, and I think he was in already a pretty bad spot coming into these two games, And I don't think that these 2 games would have done anything, in my opinion, to change Ineos's mind if it had already been made up, right? Like if they had already said, we're keeping him, he's done all right, it's fine. I don't think these results would make them change their mind and want to get rid of him. And I think in the same way, if they've already made up their mind, we need to get rid of this guy, I don't think those results would make them think, oh no, we have to keep him, right? It's not a cup final that you beat, the best team in the world in. It's a bloody 3-3 draw against Porto and a 0-0 against Aston Villa. So
the great Aston Villa, come on, mate.
The great Unai.
Champions Leagues and all that.
Yeah, good evening. But I, if it's me, you've got to get rid of him soon. And I would prefer, for the sake of the interim manager or whoever's going to take over the team, do it now in the international break and see what you can do with some of the players, see what you can get sorted out in this next couple, this next week or so before you have to go and play again. I know it's not a lot of time and the interim manager is basically screwed regardless, but I think they've seen enough to make their decision. So if they're not going to make it, if they're going to have all this bloody summit and whatever, I feel like I heard some news coming out that this was planned since the beginning of the season and it's not a reaction to anything that happened with Ten Hag. I smell bollocks. But I feel like if they don't get rid of him within the next 5 days, he's going to stay until Christmas. Because I've seen enough and I've heard enough and I've kind of seen things come out in the press that I do have a sneaky suspicion that they've basically just said, you know what, we're not making any rash decisions. Even if he has an absolute stinker, we're keeping him in the job. We trust him and, we're going to give him a bit of time to really show us what he can do. And I think if you really do have a good footballing structure, that is what a good footballing structure does. I don't think they do sack people in the middle of the season randomly, even if they're having stinkers, right? If they've gone and deliberated for so long and ended up saying, you know what, Ten Hag is the best option we've got, you've got to give them a fair shake at it. And that might be 15 games. Who knows? But that's not necessarily, like, as I said, I would get rid of him. I would have got rid of him like 4 weeks ago. But I have a sneaky suspicion that they might keep him around. If he's still in a job in the next few days, I think he's going to be there at least until Christmas.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, man, because there's 2 ways, I think, to look at this. There's like what you want to happen and what you think will happen. And a couple of weeks back, for the last couple of weeks, kind of post even the Liverpool game, definitely post the Tottenham game, I've been adamant that I think they were going to sack him during this break. This was the break that I said, I'm sure they'll get rid of him because we've got a tough run of games. We're probably not going to get loads of points from these games, realistically speaking. It offers the perfect opportunity to make the decision, get the new man in, and even give them a little bit of time when they come back from international duty to bed in with the players. And also, it's early enough to potentially salvage something from the season. You're not writing off the whole season if you make the decision now necessarily. And then what I want to happen has been something that has pretty much taken a big turn after Liverpool, and then definitely the nail in the coffin was Spurs. And that's just not seeing signs of improvement in terms of not only the performances but the results. And I've been adamant throughout this whole where's the style of play bollocks argument that rival fans keep having, and even Ten Hag out fans have, that we've got a style of play. It's just crap, right? Let's stop saying that we don't have a style of play. We do. You can clearly see things that Ten Hag is trying to get them to do. The problem is the execution has been poor, or the players don't seem to want or be able to do it, right? Like, and that's the issue. So it's not purely on this style of play rubbish. It's the results have gone sour. We've had the worst start in Premier League history, a record that he's broken himself on himself 2 years in a row, right? Which is obviously not a great sign. It's not a stat you want to have. And then The fact is, the style of play is not working. It's not that we don't have one; it's not working. Like, we're not getting the performances from this style of play that we want to go, alongside poor results. So there's no Ten Hag in or out. I just feel like you have to do the right decision, and the right decision now is we've seen enough from him that you've got to make a change. So
Do you think they will do it though?
no, I think now these results have not. I think that Ineos are a curious case, really, because I think the stuff that happened in the summer was weird, first of all, but I don't think it's a reflection on Ineos as a whole. I think what's come in and the decision they've taken was because Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth have only literally been in the door for a couple of weeks when they made that decision. And I think it was the sensible business decision to wait and see, because they literally haven't had enough time to go in there and make their own analysis of the situation. They're relying on Jean-Claude Blanc and Jason Wilcox and all the other guys in the Ineos leadership group, kind of to give them their opinion. But I think they wanted to make the decision, and they are going to be the ones that make the decision. So I understand why they kicked the can down the road. So I think the thing is, we don't know how Barada and Dan Ashworth are going to work. At the moment, it looks like they're being more sensible. And I don't mean it in like making the right decision. I just mean it in being more cautious around making a big decision, like you said, than being kind of cutthroat and Roman Abramovich type, just firing managers when things go slightly wrong. That's what it looks like. But I think we're still too early into this international break to make that judgment. I think, like you said, if we get to the weekend and no decision has been made, then I think Ten Hag's in until Christmas, like you said, or maybe even longer, unless we go through like 3 or 4 defeats in a row and things become, literally worse than worse. Then I think they'll be forced into making the decision. But if he kind of carries on the way he is, where he's nicking draws here, he's getting unconvincing wins there, he's kind of losing against. Still, if you look at who we've lost to, we haven't lost to like a rubbish team.
They're respectable teams.
Technically, yeah, we haven't. Right, the way we've lost has been poor, and the fact we've been at home against a couple of them is the worrying things. But I guess from Ten Hag's perspective, he's catching life, because we can say we've lost to Liverpool and Spurs, and the Brighton one was kind of a bit of a freak result. But even Brighton away, I guess Spurs have proven even just this weekend that's not the hardest. It's not the easiest game to get a win in. So yeah, I've had enough of the whole thing though, in terms of like this process and the plan and all the rubbish that Ten Hag's been saying. I think we've got enough evidence now and a big enough sample size to say it's not going to work. So we need to cut ties and find a manager who is, like I mentioned earlier, going to be able to motivate, inspire, and get the best out of the players that we have. Because I'm sorry, you can't keep saying the players we have are rubbish. He's changed a lot of them now. Maybe they've played rubbish recently, and there's lots of reasons why that might be, but you can't constantly be looking at players. We've got rid of most of the players that people scapegoat, right? You've got rid of McTominay. You've got rid of Martial and Pogba and all these guys that the fans for the longest have been blaming. The only ones left are probably Maguire, who people still don't think is up to the standard. I guess Luke Shaw because of his injuries. I think other than that, I can't really name too many players that I feel like United fans have been banging on about as not being good enough. So you've got new players in. I'm sorry, they were all decent, if not good, or very good for their previous clubs. So why can we now turn around and still say it's the players, it's the players, it's the players? It's clearly not the players. We've now got enough evidence to show there's something wrong with the coaching setup. There's something wrong with the plan, as Ten Hag keeps saying it, and we can't stick to that plan. I'm sorry, Eric. We're going to have to divert from it, and we're going to have to kick your to the curb, to be able to do that. Whether they do it, yeah, this is where I go back to my original thing that I started with. What will happen and what I want to happen are two very different things. I hope at some point they align, but at the moment, I think there's no evidence to to point in either direction. And the more time passes, like you said, the more it's going to be a good thing for Ten Hag's job security. And you probably will see him at the Emirates when we play you guys in December, or whenever we play you guys, which I'm sure you'll be happy to see. So it's not good for our season, because, though, I will say this: if we get through this international break and it's still there, the season's gone. And it's actually despicable that we can say that after 7 games in the league, 2 games in Europe, and like 1 Carabao Cup game, that you can be at the point so low that you say season's done, mate. We're in 14th.
I've heard it from I've heard it from so many Man United fans at this point. They've already written the season off, and like that to me is so sad. As a person that grew up watching Man United be good, and like the fact that the fans were, you always had a chance. You always, even if you weren't having a great season, you always somewhere near there or near the top. And the fact that you're writing off a season after like 7 games, I feel like that in itself speaks volumes as to whether Ten Hag should keep his job. And I also think the whole plan thing, yeah, they can do the plan without you. Like, you might not be critical to the plan, and in fact, you might be detrimental to the plan, because I think this is the whole point of having the footballing structure, is that you get continuity in positions where, the manager is not necessarily the most job secure job you can have, right? You're probably, based off of today's data, you're probably in it for 11 months before you move to the next club or get fired, right? So I think the plan can continue regardless. And I think only will you really be able to evaluate the plan when you get another manager in and see how they can do it as well. And if everyone else fails too, then you start looking at the plan and thinking, Barada and, Wilcox and all you lot, what have you been doing? Because this plan stinks. We're making everyone look crap. And it's a bit like what Ten Hag's doing with your players, right? Like, maybe his tactics, maybe the style, they just don't make, it doesn't flatter any of these players. That's entirely possible. It's very improbable that 11 or however many new players you've got could all look crap at the exact same time. And that's where you kind of got to think it must be something to do with him. And I think if we, just to go back to what Benny McCarthy said, I think it's probably the most relevant thing here. Man United has always been a club that has a lot of aura around it, even, on the pitch, where you may not play the best football or whatever else, but you still go and win games because you've got the aura, right? Like, teams would come to Old Trafford and they knew already that they'd lost. You'd already beaten them in the changing rooms. And I think that the mental side of the manager and the mental side of the club in general is extremely important, and arguably more important than who's playing on the pitch, how much money you've spent in the transfer window, who your manager is. I think the most important thing is the mentality and being able to instill belief in the fans, the ownership, and the players. And a good manager can do that even with shoddy results. Like, look at what Ange is basically doing at Spurs. Even though they've had an absolute stinker, I do believe that team somewhat believes in what he's got to do, or what he wants them to do. I think the same thing can be said, as you said, about Jose Mourinho, right? Like, even if he's having a down period, I still think a lot of players are going to run through walls for him. And I don't think anybody's running through a bloody paper wall, let alone a proper wall, for Eric Ten Hag. So maybe Rude will change it all, mate. Polite Van Nistelrooy, come on down.
No. I mean, it didn't look polite when they were having their little chat as well on the sideline, which again, if Rashford's coming off the pitch saying he's gone mad, Rude's arguing with him about something tactically, maybe he literally has he's lost his mind, and or he's just he's not cut out for it. I mean, that's totally possible. Let's be honest. He did amazing things with Ajax, but at the same time, that's not the most surefire way of measuring whether a manager or a player is going to be cut out for the Premier League or La Liga or Champions League or etc. Right? No disrespect to all the Dutch people out there and fans of Eredivisie clubs and Eredivisie football in general, but it's hit and miss. You've had your Suarez's, your Van Nistelrooys, but you've also had your Kesmans and your other players who've completely flopped. So unfortunately, it does look like, even though he can point to his bloody trophies and whatever waffle he says in the press conferences, in terms of the league, we've got progressively worse. And he's either been found out, the plan, as he calls it, or his tactical game model is not working, or he personally is just not good enough to handle the job. But all right, let's wrap up the episode here quickly before we close out. Let's do the update on the prediction table. Last week, we both predicted a lot of correct results, not necessarily score lines. So I got 3 points off 3 correct results. So I predicted Arsenal 3-1 against PSG, Arsenal 4-0 against Southampton, and Aston Villa United was a Desmond. All those results were correct. Arsenal obviously won the 2 games and it was a draw. None of the scorelines were correct. So I've got 3 points. That takes me to 9 overall. You sneaky git, you only got 2 correct results, but you did get the Arsenal PSG scoreline correct. So 2-0 gets you 3 points. And then the Arsenal Southampton one, to be fair, you weren't far off. 3-0 you predicted, it ended 3-1. So yeah, you got your own team's results spot on. You were
I can't predict Man United.
Yeah, but I mean that shows that you're probably, like most good football fans and football consumers these days, because I think predicting our results is impossible. So you got 4 points anyway. That takes you to 20. So you're still absolutely smoking me. So yeah, you're on 20. I'm on 9. It's a long season, but like Man United, I might have to rule this out and say let's check again next season.
Sack the manager. Sack that bold fraud.
Oh, mate, it's not looking good. So anyway, that's where we are going into this international break. Next week we'll be back. We'll have a special segment. We'll also look towards the weekend's Premier League games. But yeah, thanks, John. It's been a good one. Actually, was not a short episode. It was probably longer than most of our normal ones. But yeah, good convo. And yeah, Saka world class and Eric Ten Hag to be sacked. Should we end like that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
All right, there we go. All right, Ten Hag out. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Why are you eating biryani, man?
See you guys
Cheers,
next week.
Cheers, everyone.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.